session of Dataphyte elections live commentary. This time I have with me Victor Agoga, soon to be Dr. Victor Agoga, who is a political analyst. He works especially in the area of elections, party switching, political violence, and some of the things that are actually most relevant for what we're having today, the big day election. So if you've been joining us so far, thank you. But just wanted to flag as well that apart from the live commentary, you can go directly on our portal, elections.dataphyte.com, to get real-time analysis on incidents, on results when they begin to come in, and of course to follow our commentary like this. So Victor, thank you for being here. Let's begin with the big theme, right? So far we've been talking about INEC's preparedness. INEC didn't have months. INEC had years to prepare for this, right? And I think we really have to give it to the commission. For the first time in the last 3 election cycles, the elections were never postponed by any bit, right? Compared to what we had in the last 3 cycles. But yet, there have been, complaints, widespread of complaints about, INEC delay, and especially in the areas that are far from, regional accreditation centers, right? So capital cities, not so much problem, but areas far from the RACs seem to be experiencing this delay, and especially very peculiar to regions like the Southeast. What impact do you think this has on, the perception of INEC credibility, and as well, candidates that have those kind of regions or states as their strongholds?
Yes, I believe this is a foreseeable problem. It's been there since Nigeria started doing elections. Right. So I do not know why INEC tends to repeat this problem all over again. It's quite disappointing, I must say. So giving them credit for not postponing the election, but we're a little bit worried that this problem has been recurring from one electoral cycle to another, and it's quite disappointing. Right. I think INEC has a very robust budget. And if the money is not enough, they could ask for more to get like vehicles to mobilize the electoral materials on time and sent to those places. So I understand the need of collating all the materials in one particular position before they are distributed to other places, maybe for security reasons and things like that. That makes a lot of sense. But there should be lots of planning and money put into logistics as well. Yeah. Because imagine people very enthusiastic to come out. You get there, spend 2, 3, 4, 5 hours and you see nobody. That's quite very disappointing as well. So they have to do better. They have to do better about that.
Right. Very well. Thanks for that. Let's zoom in a little bit. I understand that we try to not be very political, but it's very important to highlight this. Let's zoom in a little bit on what's happening in the Southeast. Especially, the INEC chairman was live a couple of hours ago talking about Imo State. This delay is not peculiar to one state, we must say. But again, the intensity in states differ, right? So in a place like Imo, right, which has Peter Obi as one of the, this made stronger candidate there, especially according to the polls. Do you think this has any effect in terms of, performance for him?
Okay. I wouldn't say Imo was particularly targeted, or Abia. I think I have Abia and Enugu experiencing substantial delays. I wouldn't say they're particularly targeted, but I would say that they also recorded high numbers of pre-election violence even before today. So there have been lots of instability in that area and uncertainties about that area. And there was this activist or agitator who was saying there will be a sit-at-home during the so all these things were happening even before the election. So there were lots of skepticism. And someone posted on Twitter that I think he is one of the NYSC staff, INEC staff, and they were saying a number of people are refusing to go to some of these polling units because they have history of violence in those units. So people don't want to put their lives at stake, and they need lots of convincing. I think there was another polling unit, I think it was in Delta State, where they said they didn't pay the driver complete money, and it was protested that he won't go take materials there. So I think all these problems are foreseeable. With good security, good assurances, training of staff, I think it's not coming as a surprise, I should say. I think I should have been prepared for all these things because we know these areas are already flashpoints. There would have been better preparations for things like this.
I think to a good extent, INEC did try to foresee this. Like you said, these are foreseeable problems because like a couple of, like a week ago, the INEC chairman had to say voting would not go on in 240 polling units that were marked as high risk in terms of insecurity. But then again, one would wonder, if you set the timetable for 8:30, it meant that you sort of think you would be able to make that time frame, right? And then looking at the small, amount of time people have to vote is about 6 hours, right? And if by half the time you're not even ready, I think that tells something about our democratic readiness. Don't you think so? Do you think I've seen a lot of positive comments that says that it seems that we're not there yet, but the sense of democratic consolidation is particularly strong. Do you think that's the case, especially with INEC?
I think we often underestimate the need for good logistics. So you might have the zeal, you might have the vibe and everything to go out there and vote. But if people do not show up, if the officials do not show up, it just kills the vibe at the end of the day. So I think there should be just more training, more resources on logistics, because people do not have the papers. I think that's another thing. There are some polling units where they came late and then they realized as well that they didn't have enough ballot papers. Right. And this is also in the East for some reason as well. So I do not want to read meanings into this thing or kind of bring up a conspiracy theory. But most of the reports we'll be getting are coming from a particular region of the country.
Yes.
And arousing lots of suspicion as well. So this, I think, planning logistics, I think, is what INEC is still lagging behind in compared to other parts of the world, or even other countries in Africa as well. I think logistics is a major problem and might dampen the trust in political institutions. And when trust is no longer there, I think the problem of low turnout, the problem of apathy would increase as well.
Oh, yeah, certainly. I just wanted to pick on, this idea of trust, right? It seems to me that, this has been a recurring pattern with everyone I've talked to today. It seems to me that the level of enthusiasm and the level of positivity and belief that, look, if people come out to vote, if things are done right in the right pattern democratically, 1 + 1 is going to equal to 2. But then there's a sense of, if you talk to people on the ground, it's like, no, elections are not done that way. Politics is not done that way. We've not had widespread incidences of vote buying, but I've talked to people. We've had reports coming in from our analysts in the field. This traditional form of politicking is still ongoing. Do you think Nigeria is sort of in a schizophrenic state right now, where there's a middle class social media elite people who think we have to call it as it is, Peter Obi is the guy is going to win, and there's this sense of like, politics is local, where people are tipping Bola Tinubu or Atiku as the winner. What do you think? Do you think these two words meet, or do you think we are just living in a dream?
I think it brings us to a very interesting issue of the local tools that people use to mobilize votes. Because it's often said that the problem with the LP or Labour Party, for instance, that it's quite new. But they've been around for a while, but they're not as prominent as the PDP or the APC. So they lack structure. And it's often said that the structure is about those people on the ground, the traditional leaders, the even area boys as well, that will help you either intimidate or galvanize votes. And they said that Labour Party doesn't have these people. And that's true. But I think because of the cash crunch, so we don't have there's not lots of evidence of people giving money. I think because of that, the alternative now is violence or intimidation. So we see lots of instances where people are intimidated. People outrightly saying, if you're coming to vote for this person, I'll look for you and I'll do something to you. So you better not come at all or vote for a candidate. Or you see where they just go to places and disrupt the process entirely when they know the place is going pro a particular candidate and against theirs. So I think this local mobilization of prominent parties are using their tentacles on the ground to either intimidate people voting against them or to even disrupt the process entirely if they think it's not going their way. And it's quite unfortunate, I must say.
Yeah, no, entirely. You've hit the nail on the head. I just wanted to pick on that insecurity issue again. I've been Dataphyte as a team. We've essentially been monitoring the news. We've been monitoring things on the ground versus things in the news. We are seeing pockets of reports of violence here and there. It's very interesting, though. Much of this is not being covered in mainstream media, right? So the only places you find it are Situation Room, being monitored by social media, by analysts like us, and things being uploaded on social media. Do you think does it seem to you that perhaps the Nigerian, media or the Nigerian political elite are trying as much as possible not to project a story of an election filled with violence? Because I imagine as well, it's kind of early, when you begin to throw this kind of pointers, you can yourself incite violence, right? So that's not been said in the media. Do you think there's a sense in which everyone wants to have some sense of responsible reporting, which might be good for our politics, but might actually, not be factual of what is happening on the ground?
Yeah, I think there's this sense of carefulness among media personnel, especially the established ones, like channels. I was watching channels before I joined, and Arise and the rest of them. But interestingly, channels actually reported one of the electoral violence. Well, it said it has not confirmed it particularly by itself, but said it found listed online by one of its viewers. and played the video. And it was a video of somebody saying, if you're not voting APC,
right, you're not allowed to vote.
Yeah, do not allowed here. And they published it online. I was like, oh, this is good. Although they were very careful about, we've not confirmed this ourselves independently, but it is out there and we don't think it was manipulated. But this is what the person is saying. And the media has a responsibility, of course, to inform the people. I think they want to be very prudent about it as well. And they want to be not to stock fear into people. Some people might still be on the line trying to vote as well, not to cause panic as well. So there's this balancing act of reporting what is out there, but still not stoking fear and not shouting wolf as well. But when it comes to this violence as well, it's also quite kind of we say with pockets of violence, but these pockets are also concentrated somewhere, and it's also foreseeable as well.
Very well, very well.
So I'm asking, where are the security agencies? Because I could see this weeks before this election that there'll be problem in Lagos. So I wonder where are the tanks we saw days ago and the soldier men.
I've seen, so that there are two sides to what I'm seeing, right? People saying, oh, this has not been the case in Lagos, right? So perhaps because you have a candidate who is now from Lagos, it's probably, putting more attention to this. But I was like, I think I disagree with this, right? So if you look at the last, even 2019, Lagos was one of the places where you had many occurrences of violence. So does that say that Nigeria has, despite the kind of progress we are making administratively and democratically, does it say something about us not wanting to divorce ourselves from violence, regardless of whether this is in favor of the APC or the Labour Party or the PDP?
I think we should even ask why the violence in the first place. And I think it's because of the self-seeking attitude. So we feel that we have to put our man in there, or somebody from our ethnic group, or somebody from our religious group. And that's the problem. And unfortunately, we've not left that way of thinking. Whether you are from the east or the north or south, there's still this dynamic of ethnic voting. And I feel it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it is when you go further to intimidate those voting against your candidate, then it becomes bad. I feel there's nothing wrong in supporting somebody from your neighborhood because you trust the person, you feel the person has your interest in mind. That is fine. But when you start intimidating people from other camps, then that's against the law outrightly. So Lagos is a melting point, as you know, of different ethnic groups, and you have all of them coming together. So I feel the supporters of a certain political party, the APC, feels that if people from other ethnic groups are allowed to vote, they might vote against their candidates, and they cannot afford Asiwaju losing Lagos in the first place. So I think that's why you have lots of bullying and intimidation in Lagos, because they feel, there's lots of other people from other tribes here, and they might dilute the votes of the indigents of Lagos. I think that's the problem there.
Let's get political a little bit. It's a tough call, right? Everyone knows that, right? This election is tough. But then again, I'm trying to reconcile what we've had in the polls, because one of the skepticism people have had against political polls, all the polls that have been out, Dataphyte, we've done one ourselves, is the idea of rural-urban split. Even though many people don't quite express it that way, statistically, we know that's what's happening. People believe that most of the polls that tipped to be the winner seem to be concentrated among some types of voters, urban, elitist, middle class, who are politically interested, compared to how election really works in Nigeria, which is that people vote, like you said, by clan sentiment, this kind of not necessarily ideological sentiment, kinship sentiment. So my father comes, everybody in the area follows what the leader of the family and this kind of thing. Do you think really that the polls might be wrong?
Okay, there are lots of issues we pose, not just in Nigeria, but all over the world, even in the US as well. The poll said one candidate and someone else would emerge. And the thing is, during the polls, it's also interested to look at the numbers of the undecided first.
Right.
And in most of the polls showed that the undecided were capable of swinging the votes either way, either candidate. And apart from that, most of the polls are telephone based. So it means those with mobile access. And then I've conducted a poll myself. And the issue most times is that you only talk to those who are available to talk to you. So you might call up somebody and the person will like, no, I'm not interested or something like that, or even afraid to talk. So it means there's a selection bias here already. Those who end up responding are those already interested in politics. So you might have to, like in the poll of 1,000, you might have to call like 3,000 people. And 2,000 will say, oh, they're not ready to talk, or they're busy, or they don't have an opinion. So you only do with the 1,000. And you're not very sure that 1,000 is the representative group in the first place. Because it might just be those who are just politically active.
Right.
And that's often the limitation of polls, that you can't always get a clear sample of everybody's opinion. I think in the rural areas, they also have access to mobile phones. But you might say, oh, probably some of them have not charged the phone because of lack of electricity or something, or lack of education. I'm often also interested in whether the the questions in the polls are translated into local languages.
Yes, which might affect how people understand the poll.
Yeah, understand exactly the question, because somebody might just say yes or no and doesn't understand the question. So it's good that you bring it down to their very own level and ask, which language do you speak? Do you speak English, Hausa, Yoruba, or Pidgin, or which other ethnic language? I think I had to do this in my own different poll for different research. And I had to ask the person, which language are you comfortable with?
Yes.
Unless you just be getting random answers and you're making polls and not very representative. So this is the problem with polls, and who knows, the undecided, and then the problem of selection bias. yeah, if that makes sense.
So I think I agree with you to a good extent, but just trying to poke a little bit that if you have almost 8 polls pointing to the same candidate, right? Some couple of statistical errors here and there, but you have, as much as possible, these organizations trying to be statistically thorough, and all these polls at the same time, let's call it spade a spade, pointing to Peter Obi. But it seems to me that we have our analysts in the field. It seems to me that the political reality on the ground is different. What could be happening? Do you think it's just maybe for now it's just a mirage? We're just not sure. We're still just holding on to traditional political views that it's the established systems, the Bola Tinubus, the Atiku Abubakars who would win. When in reality, you don't know what people are voting. Nobody's showing you their ballot paper except the president who has done that today. So do you think it's actually possible, like calling a spade now, that things turning out in favor of who the polls has put forward, or the established political system will still have its win this time?
Yeah, that's interesting. Somebody actually wrote an article recently called "The Trump Factor in Nigeria." So it's claiming that a number of people are not very vocal about their candidates. So they have this silent majority because they feel in the local space you might even be beaten up. There was a girl who jokingly mentioned that she was not going to vote for APC, not going to vote for Peter Obi, but vote for APC instead, and people almost mobbed her in the bus. Wow. So it's not popular to actually mention a number of people,
right?
A number of candidates in public places, but they might have supporters who are just silent and not talking, and this might be the case sometimes, and that was the case for Trump and Hillary. So lots of Trump supporters were not. He had a scandal then, and there was this tape that was released about him denigrating women, just very close to the election. And there was a poll, and of course, people were not proud to associate themselves with him. But at the end of the day, he still won the election because they just kept away from the polls. So imagine a poller calls you and you have your candidate as Bola Ahmed Tinubu. But then you have the sentiment that the public might not be friendly towards you because of your candidate. You might say you're not interested in participating. And then that's where you get the selection problem. That the majority of those who participate in the poll might just be skewed towards a particular candidate. But that might be one scenario. But the other one is those who said they're undecided. You could say you're undecided, but you have a candidate because your candidate is not very popular in the social media space. You say you do not have a candidate yet, but why deep down in you probably have a candidate, but you do not just want to say it yet. I want to just prove yourself during the election.
So exactly. Well, thanks for that. I think right now it's too close to call, and I think this is a question I asked earlier, guests today. Do you think there could be a runoff? And if there is, what does that mean for our democracy right now? Because we've seen INEC had years or months to prepare for today and then see what's happening. So if there were a runoff, do you think we might reach that tipping point, negative tipping point politically?
I don't think a runoff is a bad thing. It just shows that it's a very competitive election and nobody has that. Maybe we have somebody with the highest vote, but no 3/4 majority. So I think it's a good thing. It shows that it's very competitive. And I don't think we've had a runoff in the last 2 or 3 elections. I'm not sure.
I'm not sure what at all. I think the closest to it was the Awolowo.
Exactly. So since 2019, we've not had a runoff. So I think this is also a learning opportunity. But people will start asking, why are we having a second election? And then be like, oh, there is a provision of the Constitution saying it's not even enough to just get the majority. You also have to win, I think, 24 states. So this is like an education opportunity, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. And it just shows how competitive the election has become. I want a runoff, but I don't know if I will get it. I don't know. Yeah, who knows? Yeah.
No. That's very interesting. Now let's talk about political leadership, right? And I think I've sort of tried to avoid this conversation, but we as much as we're trying not to be partisan and not to be political, we have to talk about certain things that that can point the public to. I watched the 3 candidates go to their polls, to their polling unit, respective polling unit to vote, and it's quite interesting, the kind of reception, the kind of support, the kind of sense of kinship and enthusiasm that they receive, particularly Bola Ahmed Tinubu, the number of people following him to his polls, I could count nothing less than 100. That's a very conservative estimate. Same with Atiku Abubakar. But with Obi, the situation seemed quite different. I'm wondering, is that being influenced by maybe perceptions of insecurity stronger in the Southeast? But then I would imagine somebody like Atiku Abubakar shouldn't even have people following him at all, if that's the case, looking at what's happening in Anambra. Do you think, does this have any, impact on the perception of their followers or the morale of their followers? Because it's a thing of establishment as well. For someone, if someone like Tinubu, he goes to vote, he has this massive number of people following him. 100 is actually very conservative, same as Atiku. But for some other candidates like Peter Obi, not so much people are following him. Does it have to do with the personality of the candidates, or is it pointing to something else that people should take note of?
Yeah, I think Kwankwaso also had a very rousing applause when he came as well. I think it's just the style, it's their style of leadership. Some people are just used to having these boys around them and supporters around them. Peter Obi is a little bit, I think, a more reserved person, although he has his fans and they're quite vocal online, but he's not into this crowd, or like put a packing crowd and enjoying the arousing applause. So I think it's more of the style than using the support to judge their overall outcome at the end of the day, if that makes sense. I think when Peter Obi got there, he actually waited for his turn.
Yes.
He didn't beat the queue. But when Asiwaju came, it was just, I think they rushed. I don't even think there was, the voting had started yet when he came, because I know they were constructing they were constructing the voting area for him when he was there. So it's quite rowdy, I must say. I think I was on Arise then when I saw when both of them were coming. And Arise presenters were concerned about even security as well. Like if somebody was about to do something nefarious, he would have had his chance. Lots of crowds, somebody could have stuck in something there and nobody would know. So I think one is just more organized than another one. And this might just be about their style. One is about sanity and coming to change. Another one's like, oh, we have the supporters already. I think that's just about their style at the end of the day.
Oh yes, very well. Let's talk about the youth. Right. So, which is a very big factor. That demographic is a very, very big factor in terms of how this election turns out. We almost had a crisis in 2015, if you can recall, when the close run between Goodluck Jonathan and Buhari. At some point, President Goodluck Jonathan was quite reluctant to concede until pressure started happening, pockets of pressure in different places in the north, right? And then he had to concede, especially for the security of the country. Do you think, looking at things that have happened 2 years, especially the EndSARS protest as a point of reference, do you think if things don't go maybe the way of some expected youth, and I've spoken to people this morning who have asked me that, why do I think a particular candidate is who the youth want? Because there are several other youth as well who don't represent the middle class social media people that we're seeing. But do you think there's some implication, right? If things go sour, let's say if things go not very democratically, okay, that we have this scenario of people taking to the streets and all of that.
I think that's why it's good that these candidates kind of have a grip on their fan base. So they are there to tell them, okay, I think people will be there to listen to what their principal is to say. So if their principal doesn't accept the election results, then I think there's more tendency for violence. But if the man comes out and say, okay, it's fine, I'm not contesting this election, I think there might be a number of protests here and there, but if the principal is not going to fight for it, I think there'll be less incentive to actually fight as a supporter. So I think people will be looking at the top and seeing what kind of signal and the body language of the person at the end of the day. I think that is what would actually set people either on the streets or just to accept the election results. I feel,
Right, exactly. Excellent. I've got one more question for you, but I think at this point I will try to. Do you have anything particularly important that you would like to highlight for the audience from your own perspective? If I go into questions,
No, it's just about the security in Lagos. I'm just very disappointed. Right. Because I think days ago we saw the armored tanks and everything. I was like, okay, these people are aware that this is a flashpoint and something might happen. But lots of things happened. I would never saw any security operative. In fact, there's a video where there was a policeman actually trying to appease one of the people threatening voters. I'm like, do your job and arrest him. He's committing a crime by intimidating voters. And you are there pleading with him. That is not what the law says.
This is Nigeria.
So it's just very disappointing, I must say. We saw this coming miles away. So how come we're acting surprised that this is actually happening in that state? Yeah, it's just quite disheartening. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think coming on to that, I think I will just try to loop my questioning into this. Do you think we would have high vote count? When I mean high vote count, like the total number of votes to be counted at the end of the day, are you optimistic that it might be, high enough, considering two things now? And I think you've already made mention as well. The traditional tool that is always used is cash, financial inducement. But in the absence of that, you have to run to some other alternative. Insecurity and violence is one of them. But the second thing, I think people are beginning to be skeptical that these delays in certain places is very, it's very strategic. And as you have seen the polls say, some of the polls create a scenario that, hey, this particular candidate, Peter Obi, would win if there was higher voter turnout. But looking at all of these things, do you think that there will be heavy vote count at the end of tomorrow anyways?
Yeah, it's very difficult to say because we do not know how widespread these problems are. Yeah. What comes to our attention is where it is happening now. So we do not know, how many polling units do we have now and how many of them are actually conducting elections? How many of them were disrupted and things like that? I think when we have this full picture of how widespread it was, and then we'll know whether we have enough votes to count or whether they'll just do a rerun in those states as well. So for now, I think I know about 3 or 4 or 5 local government problems. I know Surulere, I know what they call this? Yeah, Surulere, there's Oshodi, Mafoluku, and there's Ikate close to the Oba's Palace. So those are the places I know for now. And I don't think those are enough to cause a rerun in Lagos. So they're not enough, but it depends on what is happening in other polling units as well, I think.
Right. Excellent. I think our time is fast spent. It's already 30 minutes into the show. Thanks a lot for coming, Victor. This is like a recurring update. We'll have you again, I'm pretty much sure. Tomorrow we're having you at 6 p.m. where we'll be discussing. By then we hope that at least 60%, 70% of the votes must have come in. Probably not officially from INEC, but from the collation that we have at the polling units, thankfully, due to the IREF. So tomorrow we'll be discussing that. We'll be looking at the trends. There's a big factor here that for the first time, we have 3 big players. Usually the states are divided between, two top players. So it's a very interesting commentary we're expecting tomorrow. Thank you so much for joining us, Victor. And we'll see you again tomorrow.